Welcome to Industry Ignited, the show where we sit down with leaders who are reshaping industries, inspiring change, and elevating the way we do business. I'm your host, Dr. Leeanne Aguilar. Today, we're talking leadership at the highest level, not just as a title, but as a catalyst for growth, transformation, and measurable impact. My guest is Becky Barta, Chief Elevation Officer at RB Elevate, an executive coach, leadership development partner, and growth strategist on a mission to help leaders thrive so that teams grow stronger and organizations rise with them. Becky brings over 20 years of experience leading operations, organizational transformation, and high-performance teams. She's led strategic deployments impacting billions in revenue, guided major corporations through complex acquisitions and restructures, and consistently delivered results, from operational efficiencies and cost savings to market growth and profitability turnarounds. In addition to her work at RB Elevate, Becky serves as an adjunct professor at the University of Nebraska at Omaha, teaching in the Executive MBA program, and has served as an influential executive volunteer leader with the Association for Supply Chain Management, guiding networks through innovation while maintaining passion and commitment. Becky, welcome to Industry Ignited.
Good morning, Leanne. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to our conversation again today. So thank you. So Becky, you've held executive leadership roles in global operations and now lead RB Elevate as Chief Elevation Officer, which I love that title, by the way.
Thank you.
What inspired the transition from corporate leadership to coaching and leadership development?
Yeah, I think, two things really influenced that decision for me. First off, as I was holding an executive operational role, the work that really energized me while I was in that space was really building people. Guiding a new manager to find their voice, understanding how to motivate teams, sharing in transformation of creating a high-performing team. It really hit my center of reward and brought joy to me. That was really the biggest catalyst. But then secondly, I also realized that my impact could be bigger than just one company. After 20 years running global operations and transformation, I really wanted to take what I knew worked, creating clear strategy, strong systems, a very human-centered leadership style, and share that, help more leaders thrive, help more companies to grow. And so impacting a multitude of companies has really motivated me rather than just focusing on one. So I launched RB Elevate. I have the same passion. It's just a different platform. I still love good process maps occasionally, but now I spend my time helping leaders and really, creating clarity, building trust, and getting measurable results, without burnout for themselves or for their teams.
Yeah, so I'm really hearing that you wanted to focus in on making an impact where you felt like you could the most, and not only just with one organization, but with multiple organizations.
Yeah.
And just being able to make a bigger impact and a wider impact as well. So that transition, that makes sense. Looking back, what are the pivotal moments or lessons that shaped your leadership philosophy?
I've been really fortunate in my career that I've had great mentors along the way. Their voices are really what resonates on a day-to-day basis for me. I hear them speaking to me often. And, certainly I've been fortunate that other people were a key component to my success. I want to share that with others. I want to be able to be a key component for someone else's success. There are a few moments when I look back in my career where they were very transformational. I may not have known it at the time when I was experiencing it, but looking back, I know they were big moments. And those big moments that I think about really had to do with taking a big risk. And, what I learned is that it took a lot of bravery and a lot of, gumption for me to advocate for myself in those moments and believing enough in me to take a big leap. What I learned is not everyone's going to cheer for you. Not everyone's going to value your success. And so it's important that you're confident enough in your decisions and your approach that you can hold strong in those moments where you might feel some resistance. Celebrate the wins and, pick up when you see a lesson. When something didn't go quite like you wanted it to, it's only a failure if you don't learn from it. So, keep an open mind, learn from those lessons that happen along the way, and just stay the course on your vision.
So with the mentors, were they people that you sought out intentionally, or were they people that you worked with? Or tell me a little bit about mentoring.
Well, one, I believe in mentorship. I think mentorship is a strong part of a professional journey. And so in some cases, my mentors were people that I kind of fell into, whether it was they were a great boss at a period of time when I really needed that mentorship. But I also have mentors that I've sought out and really taken the time to build a relationship with someone who is external to my regular professional circle, just to be able to be a sounding board. Hey, how does this sound for you? Help me understand. Am I seeing this clearly? To bring a different perspective to decisions that I might be making or choices that I might be having to make.
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm. And you talk about helping leaders thrive with clarity, confidence, and purpose. What does that really mean in practice?
Yeah, this is a great question and really at the core of my mission as part of RB Elevate. I believe that good leaders are those that communicate well and create clear vision for their teams. Just using an acquisition as an example, we might not have all the answers. We might not know what the best integration strategy is or what the best approach is for bringing two teams together. But if clarity exists in the priorities, and if we as the leader, create clarity in the goals, the team can make the right decisions about how to get there. And so what I really focus on is communication. How do you get clear about your vision and your goals and what your expectations are for the team to achieve, and communicate those well and often and frequently. I focus a lot of time around messaging with leaders that I work with around how to coach, how to mentor, how to message with their teams.
All right. Yeah.
So that's really the clarity side. Confidence, the confidence piece of what we're trying to drive is really about preparation and repetition. Right. Confidence doesn't happen by accident. People aren't born with confidence. A lot of what I do is helping leaders understand that confidence comes from being able to thrive in a change management environment when we're in a constant state of change. In the world that we live in, change is a given. It's happening all the time, every day. And navigating that change can be really difficult unless you do it with confidence. And confidence really isn't about knowing all the answers. It's about preparing well for what's in front of you. I'm a big hiker, and if I go on a 2-day hike and I don't prepare for that 2-day hike, I'm not going to do very well.
Right.
You need to train. You need to have the right tools and the right equipment to survive in that space. And if I don't prepare for it, it's not going to be a very pleasant hike. But if I prepare, it goes well. And so, I help people prepare in order to be confident about the mission that they're about to go on. And then celebrate the wins, repeat, celebrate, repeat, celebrate, repeat. Celebration, really is a big part of the DNA that I try to bring into an organization.
And I would think mindset is probably a big part of that too, just helping people set a, positive and a mindset of, that's probably part of the confidence. And
it absolutely is. And, really leads into the purpose side of our mission and, helping people feel connected to the teams that they serve. I'm a big advocate of servant leadership. I believe in servant leadership to my core. I think that teams win, not individuals. And so it's really important for leaders to feel connected to their team and, to remain humble and acknowledge the contributions of others to really, to your point, drive that purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know you really focus on high performance team and development and strategic facilitation. Can you walk us through your process when you're working with a leadership team?
That process can vary. It really depends on the problem definition within the organization. Every organization has, a different problem. Building a team really happens when you can rally around whatever that problem statement is that they're trying to solve for. Maybe it's a lack of clarity in roles and responsibilities. Potentially it's a large transformation that needs to happen within the organization. And building that team really starts with understanding where the challenges are and making sure that everyone has agreed that, hey, this is the problem that we're trying to solve. So that's a big part of what I do. And then, I lead into some discovery actions. So I try to do stakeholder interviews. I want to inform that problem statement and create some alignment around, roles, around decisions, around current state of how the business is functioning. And then from there, we just get to work on building a plan. I have a lot of tools in my toolbox. And so whether it's, strategy development and deployment, or we're trying to create the climate and culture for a high performing team, it's important, start small, get some quick wins, lock in those gains, and then, create that cadence by which people can set an expectation of how are we going to operate as a team to review and continue to build into a stronger organization.
Yeah, and you mentioned, I know every organization is different, but in your experience, what are some of the more common challenges leaders face that keep them from reaching their full potential? And how do you help them overcome those?
Yeah, a lot of organizations share in the same issues. The challenges are not unique. We like to think that we're unique, but it's not necessarily that we're unique. It's every organization has a lot of similarities in the challenges, and what I see is really a couple of things. So one of the big challenges that I see is when leaders don't value their time. If you treat your time as if it was your money, would you look at it differently? That's a question that I often ask. And what I can see this manifest in a couple of ways. One of those is where a leader is uncomfortable saying no. And they're uncomfortable declining an opportunity because they think that opportunity is the next thing for them to be able to grow to that next level in their career. And so they struggle to say no to anything that's put in front of them. And one of the best lessons that a leader can learn is how to say no and say it gracefully, because they can't take on everything. As a leader, you and a high performer, you start to be the person who gets tapped for all things. And if you say yes all the time, that space where you are excelling quickly goes away because you start to miss deadlines, you get burnt out, you lose sight of your goals and your mission. And it's really important for leaders to learn gracefully. Sometimes you just say, I can't work on that now. I have all of these things that are a higher priority for me to take care of. Defer it to someone else. Use it as an opportunity to delegate to your team. But you have to be able to gracefully decline. You can't take on everything. And that kind of feeds into the second thing, and I just talked about it a little bit, but delegation is something that a lot of leaders struggle with. I hear statements often that say things like, this is a critical item, I must do it. I can't pass this on to someone else. my team's already so busy. I don't want to overburden them. So I'll continue to do this task. Or they'll say something like, this was a task that I had in my last job in this company. When I got promoted, I just kept it and continued to do it. I didn't hand it off to someone else. And all of those items where you're not doing delegation appropriately, it impacts the leader, but it also impacts the organization in total. Leaders end up operating in spaces that are not the correct level for where they are in their journey in the organization. So if you keep too many of those tasks that you shouldn't have, that you should have delegated to someone else, if you keep too many of them, by the time you become a senior manager or a director or a senior director, a chunk of your time is being dedicated to tactical responsibilities that should have been handed off to other team members. And then, you're not creating the space for you to take on level appropriate activities.
Yeah, I really relate with that. One of the best bosses I ever had early in my career told me her best piece of advice was, as a leader, the best leaders delegate.
Yes.
They aren't the doers, they're the delegators. They manage and they
Yep.
hand off. And that stuck with me throughout, my career. So
Absolutely. And managing your time is really an important part and an important component of that. I distinctly remember sitting down with one of my mentors who happened to be my boss at the same time. And, we were talking about the multitude of meetings in our calendar and how our calendars were just packed full. And, he brought up an executive leader in the organization at the time and said, hey, what do you think about this person? Well, they're a good leader. They have, a lot of good things. And we're going through this activity of kind of dissecting that person as a leader and what we thought of them. And then he pulls up their calendar and he puts it on the screen and he's like, look. And that person has like one meeting a day in their calendar and the rest of their time is available and open. And, that was a very big light bulb moment for me to say, I need to manage my time differently. If you're going to be a leader, it means you need to be available for your team, be present for them. And part of that becomes, how do I manage my time?
yeah, that's a great insight. That is really
It's tough to do.
consider.
It's not
It is hard
easy.
to do.
It's
It
way
is.
easier for me to say it than it
Yeah.
is to do it, for
Yeah,
sure.
but you're right. I mean, time is a limited resource,
It
and
is.
if you're not managing it well, then it escapes. It runs away from you. It gets consumed by all kinds of things that you're fighting fires that maybe other people can put out, and you're not
Absolutely.
present and focused if you're constantly distracted and moving in different directions. So that is, I like that. That's a good something to remember too. That time is like money. It's a currency.
It is. It's a
something to
currency.
manage well.
Hmm.
Now you've led teams across hundreds of or multiple regions and cultures. What are your top strategies for building alignment and engagement in such complex environments?
Yeah, this is it's interesting because as you mentioned, I've led teams in lots of different regions. I've led teams that are located in Europe and in the Middle East and in South America and then, all over the US. And what I found is it doesn't matter where you go, each facility has its own culture. And although we try to create synergies between the cultures in our organization, it's actually, there's nuances of difference. And some of them are larger, a nuance in difference between someone in the US versus someone in Europe is sizably different. But every plant, every building has its own culture. And so as a leader for me, it's important to establish the what and the why. Because, I found that the intent carries over those geographical borders. The tactics are what is local. And the tactics for execution is really a manifestation of the local culture or the region. And so as a leader, it's important for me to be really clear about defining expected outcomes, to get clear around what good looks like. And and then let the teams decide how. How are they going to get it done? How are they going to meet expectations? And it's interesting because then if you start to build that, if you're a, cross geography organization where you have multiple locations, build best practice events, build a touch point in which people can share the how by which they're getting things done. And what that does is it gives you a space to celebrate where good things are happening in certain facilities, but it also allows others to see how things are getting done. And it triggers them to, one, say, "Ooh, I'm not where I need to be. I need to improve our performance to keep up with them." It gets a little competition going between facilities. But it also shares some really great ideas. I've seen good ideas come from every facility I've ever managed, and every facility I've ever led. And being able to share those across borders is really important, to give people, that satisfaction of celebrating their win, but also to develop relationships between leaders across regions and that best practice sharing.
All right. So you're just creating a space for that sharing and listening and
For sure, but also creating upfront clarity around the mission.
Okay.
Because if you don't create that, then people will go off and do whatever they think is appropriate or right. But if you create the expectation of what they need to achieve, the clarity around the what, and the why, give them a sense of why we're doing the things that we're doing, allow them to determine how.
Yeah. So first getting everyone on the same page, working for the same objective.
Absolutely.
And then the how comes in naturally afterwards. And that's going to vary, like you said, by region.
By region, by structure, team dynamics, many different things. Mm-hmm.
How do you balance operational metrics like efficiency and profitability with the human side of leadership? Things like morale, trust, and culture.
Yeah, this is a great question. And I think that, I've always operated under the premise that if you build your people will build the organization. And that's partly why I believe very strongly in people-centered leadership. I think that people don't want to be boiled down to a number. And so it's really important to know that successful metrics come out of good actions from people. And so one of the statements I often use is we can't have any numbers without names, and we can't have any stories without numbers. So it's important to bring the people and the behaviors that contributed to positive results in a metric. And you can't tell a story of bad performance or good performance without having the data to back up that it delivered results. And that's a difficult concept for people to latch onto on occasion, because teams really like to be able to, I'm going to say, dodge and weave. They like to take the heat off of them and tell the story, but they might not have any data that's backing up the story. And it's important to have both sides of the coin. So you must have data that demonstrates what the results are, but tie that to a story that talks about the behaviors that have shifted to create positive results.
Okay, so I'm hearing that sometimes it may be just emotional, but not really supported by actual
correct
data.
Support by the facts.
Yeah,
yes.
The facts, and it is hard to separate sometimes when people have those stories, like you said, and the stories though may come from insecurity, they may come from personal previous situations or that kind of thing. They may not be accurate or true even.
Correct.
So,
yes.
Yeah. Interesting.
And, we use a concept that's called perfect week in this space. And perfect week is really saying, what are the important metrics for us to achieve, which helps us understand the mission. But then we also, in collaboration with the team, define how we're going to show up. So things like, how are we going to keep people safe? How are we going to communicate? What's our mission around teamwork, around motivating others, around planning for the mission we must achieve? We spend a lot of time talking about the how. And here's what we must achieve. How are we going to come to the table and be part of that successful mission?
Yeah. You've guided a lot of organizations through acquisitions and restructures and market shifts. What are the keys to leading successfully through times of major change like that?
Yeah. I'm a big fan of teaching people about change management. So if there's going to be a large initiative, whether it's an acquisition, whether it's a organizational restructure, it could be any multitude of things, but if it's big, it's important to first start with talking about change, because change is an emotional thing. And although we're in a constant state of change, there are always small changes happening around us. The environment around us is shifting at all times. When we're going to undertake something big, it's important to give people the language to talk about their change and their change management in a healthy way. So I use an adaptation of the change curve, which, is a Kubler-Ross model with my teams. It gives them the language to discuss how they feel. Are they angry? Are they feeling like, this isn't real? I haven't figured out that this is a real thing yet. What position on the change curve are they sitting in? And then, my guidance for a leader is it's always your responsibility to get through the change curve first before you can start teaching someone else and pulling someone else through that change. So leaders have to go first, and giving them that language to talk about where they are on that change is important. And then, I use a lot of tools around change management. One of my favorites is a Kotter's change management model that I've adapted for different large scale changes like an acquisition or an organizational transformation. And, a big part of the Kotter's model is around communication and making sure that we're communicating effectively at all stages of change. Because the reality is where changes fail is when the culture eats that change. And that happens because people are always going to fill in the answer. The human mind works in a way in which it's going to go find the answer. And so that answer isn't always positive. If people are feeling threatened, like, hey, this change is really going to impact my job, then they're going to fill in that missing communication point with negativity. And it's really important as a leader to have a well-designed communication model and to have very frequent touch points of change. Things like one-on-one communications, town halls, going to meet people where they are and where the change is being impacted. All of those things are very important, and it's part of what I teach in helping people and coaching them and guiding them through sizable change.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, even with my marketing company, one of the things we do is help in that communication process when there is like a major change in an organization through acquisition or mergers or just growth if a company is pivoting, and setting expectations, I think, is part of it. Really understanding the concerns of the different employees within the organization, and then having a plan for communicating the rollout, how the change is going to work, how it's going to impact the employees and the leaders and the organization, what that looks like. And the more, the better you can set those expectations and create comfort, because like you said, I think fear does come up a lot. Uncertainty,
it does.
fear. It's like they feel threatened. Like, what does that mean for me? Is my job at risk? Is something going to be taken from me? And so it is a visceral experience. I think,
It is. That Kubler-Ross model is really excellent. We've adapted it a little bit. But The reality is that model was actually formed out of the stages of grief, because it really change is really about grieving to some degree about what you're losing. And if you can address that and address it in a very open manner, and it will make the change go so much smoother.
Yeah, absolutely. And acknowledging that, I think, as well, just letting the members of the organization, the employees,
Yeah.
know that, hey, we understand this is going to be, difficult. We understand that you're going to experience uncertainty and you might be confused or not know. And we are here to support you, and letting them know what resources are in place, or what, how they're going to be supported throughout that change.
And that it's expected, and it's okay. It's okay to feel the emotion of the change. So many times I think in business, we try to say it shouldn't be emotional. But the reality is it is.
Absolutely. And emotions come up whether we like it or not. I mean,
Exactly.
and so being prepared to deal with the emotions, I think, is more powerful than just ignoring them or pretending that they don't exist. Yeah.
It absolutely is. Yeah.
Becky, you have a proven track record of turning around business segments and driving double-digit growth. What role does leadership versus process play in those kinds of results?
Yeah, I think about it in a very simple analogy. The process is really the engine. If you think about it from an automotive standpoint, the automobile, you have to have an engine to be able to run. And the process is really the engine. The leadership, it's the vehicle. It's the rest of the vehicle that helps that engine to run efficiently. I'd like to have a Ferrari. I think everybody would want to have a Ferrari. Maybe I'm mistaken in that, but a high power engine and a beautiful vehicle for it to be in has speed and efficiency. But that's not always what you're going to have, right? You're not always going to have a Ferrari. It is important to understand that they work together. The process is most successful when it's highly leveraged, and it's highly leveraged by leader behavior. And I think sometimes people focus on one and not the other. I focus a lot on leadership, not a lot on process, or a lot on process and not a lot on leadership. And they go hand in hand. And so I think, the process strength can create consistency in outputs, the cadence by which the engine's going to run. The leadership, it defines like, how far are we going to go? Is this a vehicle that can run hundreds of thousands of miles, or are we near breakdown and we are only going to make it 100 miles down the road?
Okay.
And so it's really interesting to use that analogy with teams to understand they have to have both.
Right.
One doesn't work without the other.
I like that analogy. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Ferrari, like you said.
A Ferrari would be great.
It would be great. Yeah, beautiful. When you think about organizational transformation, where do most companies go wrong, and how can they avoid those pitfalls?
This is a big topic. We could talk about this for a very long time. I'm going to give you just a couple of my thoughts around this, but it's a really big topic because, every organization is a little bit different. I think there are some commonalities. One of the commonalities that I see is that an organization, they treat that transformational initiative as a project and not a product. And here's the difference. So a project is really like a checkbox of getting the steps done of transformation. And when that activity is finished, I check it off and I move on. But transformation is really like a product. And you know this from the marketing space. If, a product first launch isn't always where we end up. There has to be iterations, and we have to have different tools in, say, bringing that product to market. There needs to be a roadmap. There needs to be clarity and ownership. Who owns what around managing that product? You have to create feedback loops and different iterations, redesign as necessary. Be stubborn about the vision, but flexible with the plan. And And I think where organizations go wrong is they just check the boxes. Oh, yep, we did this on our transformational plan. We're good. We move on. And that's not really how it works.
Yeah, I think that's a really important distinction. It's not just a one time, we're done, yeah, move on. It is a process. It is an ongoing, transformation just doesn't stop. Like change doesn't stop.
It
It's a
doesn't.
constant evolution. It's a constant movement, and being aware of that and managing it on an ongoing basis, not just okay, did that, we're done.
Exactly. And, I think the other thing is we underestimate the amount of time that it takes in communication. Like dedicating time, energy, and effort to deliberate and intentional communication as part of any transformational plan is really important. And I think companies often underestimate what it takes.
Right.
They think I can communicate once and, well, I have already told you that, so it's enough.
But it is just like marketing in that sense too. It's not a one and done thing. You can't just run a campaign and expect people to, know who you are and want to buy your products all day long. It's
Exactly.
an ongoing, constant, machine that you're running, and it evolves and it changes and the messaging changes. So, there really is a lot of similarity there in that
There
analogy.
absolutely is. And, as you know, communicate in a multitude of means, like
Right.
many different ways until the message is received.
Yeah.
And sometimes then you have to keep communicating.
You do.
Yeah.
And that's, in order for a communication to be received, even, it takes, like 7 to 12 times, just depending on, the communication for it to stick in a
Right.
person's mind, or, for a behavior to change or a new habit to form, it takes a lot of repetition as well. So, yeah.
Indeed, it does, for sure. And then, I think the last part that organizations miss on is they wait too long in failing fast. So they'll hang on to something that's just not working as part of the transformation, whether it's a person who's not in the right seat, or it's, a process or a mission that they've given people as part of the transformation. They just hang on to it too long because they don't want to recognize the failure, whether that's an ego thing or, whatever. We need to recognize that, things just don't work sometimes. And the sooner that we take care of what's not working and adjust, the better it is for the teams to be successful in transformation.
And that makes sense, especially for high performers, people who are out there to win, to have, or being able to embrace failure and say it's okay to fail.
It
And
is okay.
in fact, like you said, it's welcome.
Yeah, create a safe space for it and
Yeah.
understand how you're going to manage that. It'll go a long way to success for the transformation.
So for leaders who are listening who feel stuck in complexity or struggling to inspire their teams, what's the first step they should take today?
Yeah. I think, I coach leaders on doing a reset. Take a 7-day period of time as an example, and work on resetting your position. Oftentimes, things spiral out of control. We have many, many things on our plate. We're trying to manage in a bunch of different spaces. Really, spend some time and reset yourself, because if you don't do that reset, it's really hard to make those adjustments. Create a space, carve it out, and create a dedicated space where you're intentionally going to reset yourself. And, I have a hard time shutting off my mind. And so I really have to intentionally say to me, speak to myself and intentionally say, okay, I'm going to take 20 minutes every morning and I'm going to focus on setting myself up for a good day. As part of the reset, start that behavior. And I have a couple of books that I read, but I need to get my mind stimulated on something that is positive in nature. Don't get wrapped up in all of the stress of what you have going on today. Think about the things that are going to help you have a good day. And so I have a couple of books that I use that are daily readers. One of them's from John Maxwell, and it's his daily reader where, it's a leadership message every day. And it's so interesting how every day seems to apply to my day. And so, I'll read a passage in that book and then, I'll meditate and do some journaling around how do I apply that to situations that I am in. And it's really taking the time to shift my mindset into a space of positivity in how I'm going to approach my day. And so, I think that's doing a really great healthy behavior. But then, do a reset on your calendar, get rid of meetings that you don't need, delegate to others, meetings that could go to someone else. Really think about all of the things that are occupying your day and narrow it down. What are the critical few that I must focus on? And try to pare down where you are focusing your time, energy, and effort as a leader. I think, like we talked about before, high performing leaders tend to get their plates overflowing. And this is a great reset point to be able to say, okay, I got to clean house on what I'm working on. The best leaders are those who can get things across the finish line and deliver results with the initiatives that they're working on. And so it's important that we know what are the critical few that we must focus on and really go after those. And then ask for help on the rest. One of the things I think that people really struggle with, what I find especially new leaders, are they think it's a weakness to ask for help. And the reality is everyone needs help. And rarely are you going to find a space in which people say, yeah, no, I don't want to help you. It's human nature to want to help others. I think there's a lot of people in the world who truly just want to help. And sometimes it's just a matter of asking.
And I think that comes back to why coaching is so important.
It is.
I mean, it just helps create that clarity in that space. And I mean, from my experiences as well as a leader, it gets lonely at the top sometimes. And
Absolutely
it's easy to lose sight of things and get distracted and let your energy go in all kinds of different directions. So being able to reset and focus and be very intentional about how you spend your time and what you want to accomplish, and then have your energy go towards those efforts is I think critical. And
it is critical. And, self-reflection, EQ, it's a really valuable skill for all leaders. I think it's something that's missing in a lot of our leadership development and training, but understanding how to assess yourself is really important in building you to a better space.
And I love that EQ has come to the forefront more lately, and that skills are being shared more readily, and the importance. I mean, again, I think it was more frowned upon, or people just wanted to separate the emotional elements from business in the past. But we are human. We are full, whole people, and emotion is part of that. And if you aren't skilled in how to deal with emotions, regulate emotions, especially when life happens and we all deal with things that impact us and we don't even realize how they impact us oftentimes, but it comes across, or it ends up impacting how we communicate and how we treat other people. And so
Absolutely.
being aware of our own emotions and tendencies and how we, express emotions is super important. And I think that, again, it comes back to getting help. I mean, getting either having a mentor or a coach or somebody to bounce off, your off and get a feedback from.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how do you see a leadership? I mean, we talked about, just emotional intelligence, for example, but how else do you see leadership evolving over the next 5 to 10 years, especially with all of the rapid changes in technology, like AI, workforce, expectations, and global markets?
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation, because what we were just talking about around the importance of EQ and the importance of the human side, I think that's going to be amplified as we move forward. Technologies like AI is not going away. And I actually think it's something that there's been a lot of technologies that have come forward. And I think AI is going to be transformational for organizations. It's such a powerful, it's such a powerful tool. And if you get to utilization of AI to do even like the menial tasks, the data crunching, the data analytics, you get AI to do the things that don't require decision making. I think you're going to need more people who are skilled in decision making, more people who are skilled in communicating a message, telling the story of why, visioning, building trust. Those factors that are the human side of leadership are going to become more valuable skills as we move forward, because AI is going to pick up a lot of the rest.
Right. And for leaders, that is great. I mean, just creating time there, even just by having tasks automated and
yeah. And we're going to be, I think it's going to move us at a much faster pace. So expectations are going to get higher if you haven't spent the time and invested in learning about how to effectively use AI as part of the way in which you work. Now's the time, because it is going to run at a very rapid pace as we move forward. And so, learn how to effectively use AI so that you can really lean in developing your skills in the leadership space, in the decision making, in the visioning, in the
I completely agree. Yeah, it is a crucial time right now, and leaders definitely need to, if they haven't already, step into that and intentionally get acquainted with the different software platform, the apps and platforms out there, and everything that AI can do, because it's super awesome. Everything it can
is
do.
awesome, actually.
Yeah,
Yes.
well, Becky, this has been an awesome conversation. I really learned a lot and appreciate you coming on the show. Where can listeners connect with you to learn more about your work and RB Elevate?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. This has been a wonderful conversation. If people want to connect with me, and I encourage them to do so, I'm always interested in building my network and connecting with other leaders. So feel free to do so. LinkedIn's a great place to reach out to me. I have both my personal account and RB Elevate is on LinkedIn, as well as Instagram. I have RB Elevate page on Instagram. My website, they can reach out on the website as well. So rblevate.com. And I'm happy to connect with people. This has just been wonderful, and I appreciate the time with you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your experience, your wisdom, and your passion for helping leaders rise. Your career, it's proof that when leaders elevate themselves, they elevate everyone around them. So for our listeners, and thank you for listening. And until next time, stay bold, stay curious, and keep igniting change in your industry. Thank you.
Thanks, Leeanne.